The new book is called The Mindful Body, Thinking Our Way to Chronic Health. Now, this 45 years of research has shown me that virtually all of us are mindless almost all the time.
You've just heard Ellen Langer from Harvard University. I had the opportunity to interview Ellen Langer in June of 2023 in anticipation of the release of her new book, The Mindful Body, which comes out next week. You should check out wherever you buy your books from for this title. And this is going to be a wonderful book with lots of personal stories and a summary of research that Ellen has been doing for decades now. Just a few things about Ellen Langer. If you don't know who she is, she has been called the mother of mindfulness. That's where a lot of her research has been. The mother of positive psychology. And who knows, after this book, maybe the mother of mind-body medicine. Now, please enjoy this conversation on the Psych Sessions podcast. We know you want to reach every student in your course to help every student individually succeed. But how do you find out what each student wants and needs? Macmillan Learning's Achieve for Psychology offers a solution. Ask them. Achieve puts goal setting and reflection surveys in each course, where students share their aspirations, thoughts, and concerns about what they are trying to learn. Their responses help you tailor lessons and assignments and addresses both individual and class-wide needs. See for yourself. Go to macmillanlearning.com/psych sessions for an introductory tour today. Macmillan's Achieve for Psychology, engaging every student, supporting every instructor, setting the new standard for teaching and learning. The Psych Sessions podcast is sponsored by STP. That is the Society for the Teaching of Psychology. That's APA Division 2. You can find them at teachpsych.org. The views or product endorsements expressed do not represent the views, support, or endorsements of STP. Psych Sessions is so grateful to have STP as a long-term supporter. Folks, it's my pleasure today to be sitting across virtually from Dr. Ellen Langer from Harvard University. And we are going to be talking about mindfulness, among other things. And Ellen, I just want to tell you, I've never been so mindful for the start of a podcast interview. I just feel like in reviewing your materials this morning and just your body of work that I've been put in my place. I cleared off my desk so that I could just be present. How does that sound for a start of our conversation?
That sounds just fine.
Thanks for taking the time. And I know that you're busy. You've been working on a new book that I hope that we can talk about today. But I do want to just check in and see where are we finding you on this June day of 2023? Where do you live when you're not on campus?
Well, right now I'm in our house in Dartmouth, Mass, and it's just beautiful. I overlook a river, and except for the excessive pollen, it couldn't be better.
Great. And you were cracking a joke ahead of time that you should be able to just will your way, mindfully will your way over this pollen problem.
Well, okay, we'll talk about that, Garth, because it's not so much willing one's way, but when we get to that, people need to understand that this new book, which actually is out and will be published by Random House on September 5th, is all about mind-body unity. And what that means is that every thought you have affects your body, every movement affects your mind, and so on. It's one unit. But I'll wait till you ask me some question about that.
Well, let's just jump in because I do have a couple questions now that you mention it. How long have you, if people haven't followed your career, they should just go.
You mean there's somebody who doesn't know who I am?
Yeah, well, okay. They may exist out there, but,
that's fine.
They can go to Wikipedia. I mean, you're of that level. So, or they could read a couple of your books or your research. But how long have you been doing research on body? Because I'm not aware of the research. Has that been kind of a later career move?
No, no, no. The new book is called The Mindful Body,
That's right.
but Thinking Our Way to Chronic Health. I've been studying mindfulness for, about 45 years. I started when I was about 12. No. The results of each of the studies are so surprising and, to my mind, important that each study led to the next study until I got to this final presentation in the new book.
Okay.
But
So,
people need probably, Garth, we can do it this way, that I'm a talker.
yeah.
So I can just go on without you asking questions, but you should interrupt me when you want to. But the first thing I think people need to know about mindfulness, even though I did some of the very early research on meditation, mindfulness, as I and my students study it, is mindfulness without meditation. It's the very simple process of just noticing new things. Now, what happens is when you're looking at something or thinking about something you think you know, and you notice new things about it, you realize you didn't know it nearly as well as you thought you did. So then your attention naturally goes to it. Everything around us is in flux. Everything is changing. Everything looks different from different perspectives. And what happens is when we're mindless, when we think we know, we freeze our understanding and miss basically all that's going on. Now, this 45 years of research has shown me that virtually all of us are mindless almost all the time. So I have one for you. I do this whenever I give a talk.
Yeah.
Garth, how much is 1 in 1?
2.
Okay, you think 1 in 1 is 2. The reason I use this as an example of mindlessness is because there's probably nothing else you could ask people where they, are less, are more
Sure.
sure
Yep.
that, surely 1 in 1 is 2. Don't bother me. I don't want to, be involved in this. I have important things to do. But in fact, 1 in 1 is not always 2. If you add 1 cloud plus 1 cloud, 1 plus 1 is 1.
That's
1
right.
pile of laundry plus 1 pile of laundry, 1 plus 1 is 1. 1 wad of chewing gum plus 1 wad of chewing gum, 1 plus 1 is 1. In the real world, 1 plus 1 probably doesn't equal 2 as more often as it does. And although many people don't realize this, that the numbers that most of us are dealing with is based on a base 10 number system. If you're using a base 2 number system, 1 plus 1 is written as 10. Okay, so when you hear that, you say, oh my God, this is what I thought I knew. I could be wrong. And, and it's that feeling of not knowing that leads you to, in a sense, try to find out. Right. And then we're in the present. So you actively, notice new things. That tells you didn't know. You keep returning to that, and everything feels new again. And when you're noticing new things, what happens is the neurons are firing, and this 45 years of research shows us that it's literally and figuratively enlivening. It's what you're doing when you're having fun. That if you were to do a crossword puzzle, for example, and then you're going to do it again after you've just done it, it's not fun because you know all the answers. So it's the going from not knowing to knowing that's mindful. And the problem is when people go from not knowing to knowing, they think then they know, but everything is changing. So it's forever potentially interesting.
I love your you've done so many different research studies, and so many of them make their way into psychology textbooks. And so I was reading about the study you did about, I can't remember the name you used at the time, but basically about maid service in a hotel, yeah. Right? So that's in a book that I think it's in an industrial organizational psychology book that I use in one of my classes. But yeah. I didn't ever read your name behind it. I just missed it because I'm not mindful, apparently. But tell us about that one.
Most of the time it doesn't matter who did the study. You're interested in the study itself.
I'm interested in the study.
It's not mindful.
But when I found out it was you, when I was prepping for today, I thought, this is great. I can't wait to talk to Ellen about this. So, yeah.
Okay, well, so let me tell you about what that study rests on, and then we'll talk about that study, okay?
Sure.
So many, many years ago, and this also is in many textbooks, Judy Roden and I did a study with nursing home elders where we gave them choices to make and other ways of being mindful. And then we found that they lived longer. So this was quite amazing. And so for me, the question was, wow, how can our thoughts lead us to living longer? And so that led, all of the work on choice led to the work on mindfulness. And then I thought to myself, mind, body, these are just words. And that the problem by having this dichotomy, which most people buy into, mind body dualism, you have the question of, well, how do you get from this fuzzy thing called a thought to something material, the body? And I said, let's just put the mind and body back together and make it one unit. And if it's one unit, then wherever we're putting the mind, we're necessarily putting the body. So the very first study we did with this is what's called the counterclockwise study. And just quickly, we retrofitted a retreat to 20 years earlier and had old men live there as if they were their younger selves. Okay, so they talked about the past and the present tense. The place seemed to be 20 years from the past, and so on. This simple thing, by putting their minds back in the past, resulted in an improvement in their hearing, their vision, their memory, their strength, and they look noticeably younger. Now, all this is without any medical intervention. So that was the first test.
Okay, I'm going to interrupt you. I'm going to interrupt you right there because I read about that study in your book called Mindfulness, and I was just wondering, how difficult was it to I'm floored by your creativity in the way that you designed these things. How much time and planning did it take to put that one together?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. If once the study started, I had realized all that it was going to encompass, I don't know that I would have done it.
Right.
You know, that here I had these old people come to see if they were able to be in the study. They were very slowly walking to my office, and it looked like they might not live through the day. What am I doing taking them away for a week, where I'm going to be basically responsible for everything, what they eat, what they talk about, who they interact with, and so on. So sometimes thinking things through too much to be a problem. But we ran it, and the results were remarkable. In fact, I can call this now a famous study because if you watch the Simpsons Go to Havana, which is either season 7, episode 28, or season 28, episode 7, they talk about the study. Okay, so then fast forward, because doing these studies as often takes a very long time, and the medical world and the collaborators that I would need to run some of them don't believe they'll work. So that becomes very hard to do them. But so then we go fast forward to 2007, when Allie Crum, who's now professor at Stanford, was my student at Harvard, and she and I did the study with chambermaids. And now essentially, she interviewed the chambermaids and asked them how much exercise they get. And they said they don't get exercise. And that's because they think exercise is what you do after work. And after work, they're just too tired. So all we did was divide them into 2 groups. And for one of the groups, we convinced them that their work was exercise. Nothing else changed. They weren't going to eat any differently in the course of the week, exercise more vigorously, nothing as far as we could measure. But that simple change in mindset resulted in them losing weight, a decrease in waist to hip ratio, body mass index, and their blood pressure came down. And so then now we go forward further to the new book, The Mindful Body, and we have many more studies testing, again, this mind-body unity. And it's quite amazing. I'll give you an example, just a tease for the new book, but we have lots of them in it. So my graduate student, Peter Anungala, and I did this study where we inflict a wound. Okay, now the review board is not going to let us cut somebody's arm off. So it's a minor wound, but a wound nonetheless. And you're sitting in front of a clock. For a third of the people, the clock is going twice as fast as real time. For a third of the people, it's going half as fast as real time. For a third of the people, it's real time. What happened is the wound heals based on perceived time, not real time. So the bottom line to all of this is that we have so much more control over our health and well-being than people realize. And so we have study after study trying to make this clearer to people, to persuade them that they can do many of the things they think they can't do. and that there are psychological interventions, so to speak, for many diseases that right now people assume are even incurable.
Ellen, I know this is also familiar to you because it's been your life's work, but I think people might need a second just to pause and let this all sink in, because this is it
Radical.
sounds like science fiction.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, to me, it's science fact, but I can see, because it's so different from most people believe.
Yeah.
You know, the way for people to grasp some of this is for them to understand placebos. Most people have heard about
Great.
placebos, and they're really our strongest medicine. So you take something inert, a sugar pill, okay, something that's not medical, but you think it's medicine. And when you do that, then you heal. Well, what's causing the healing? It's not the pill, because the pill is inert. We're doing it ourselves. And so part of the book, deals with, well, how, in a sense, to give yourself a placebo.
Great. So that's a great entry point. When I'm thinking about how to convey this to students and make meaning of it to their lives.
So one of the things that I focus on in the mindful body is what we call attention to symptom variability. And essentially, this is, since we can't give ourselves placebos, this to me is the way we can enjoy all that placebos afford us. So basically, when people have some chronic illness, they think that their symptoms are going to stay the same or only get worse. And it turns out nothing stays the same or only moves in one direction. But what happens, this is true for stress, depression, and chronic illnesses. But let's say, Garth, you're stressed. You're fabulously stressed. You think you're stressed all the time. No one is anything all the time. And so but the problem is, when you're not stressed, now you're just enjoying yourself. So you're not thinking that you're not stressed, you're just enjoying. So then when you're stressed again, you have the memory, stress, nothing stress, right? So we call you at different times in the course of the day and ask you about the symptom, and is it better or worse than the last time, and why? And what happens is, first, because you see it's different, and sometimes better, that immediately makes you feel better. And by asking the question why, that initiates a mindful search, which we've already said is good for your health. And you're more likely to solve a problem if you seek a solution to it. So let's say, with all of this tending to when you're the most stressed, you find out you're most stressed when you're talking to Ellen Langer. The solution couldn't be easier. Don't talk to me, or make the conversation with me different. Well, we've done this with people who have strokes, Parkinson's, multiple sclerosis, chronic pain, a host of serious disorders. And across the board, we find that when they attend to how their symptoms are varying, the symptoms at the least diminish and sometimes go away entirely. So now, I had said to you, you can't give yourself a placebo. So you might say to me, well, how can I give myself, this attention to variability to make myself pay attention? Well, most of us have smartwatches, smartphones, smart something, or a good friend, smart, to just ring periodically. So you say, in an hour, let your phone ring and ask you, remind you. Then you say to yourself, well, how do I feel right now? And is it better or worse than before, and why? And then set it for 2 hours and at random times. And then in doing this, over a week, you're likely to get very positive findings. So, I mean, what's exciting to me about the mindful body is that it has so much in it that is, to my mind, readily available to people, that all work together to show the enormous control over our health. That when we recognize that we can't predict, oh my gosh, but that's okay that you can't predict, because the things that are going to occur don't come pre-labeled. If you don't see them as terrible, you don't have to predict that it's going to happen. Everybody likes surprises, and that's because surprises are positive. And so whatever happens, could be, in some sense, a positive surprise.
Well, this is what I'm hoping to get out of your book. When I read it, of course, I am intellectually curious about mindfulness. And I am going to take some of those things that you're talking about to heart, because we all do fall into, I think, these cognitive traps, or maybe these mindless traps. And so I am already thinking about how to apply, almost exactly what you're saying to my personal life. Yeah,
but so when you find, for me, I still do things mindlessly on occasion, and when I do them, I don't go, oh no, I say, yes, I was right. So again, when you find yourself having done something mindless, and if it's mindless and unkind, then you need to correct it, and you step back and you say, what's a different way of viewing this? And knowing that it's not a better view, a worse view, it's not the only view, but that everything can be understood over and over again. And then it makes everything exciting.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you about the subtitle of your book, because I only saw the title of the book, which was The Mindful Body. But then earlier you said the full title, and I love good titles. And it struck me as a good title. What was it again?
Okay, the subtitle is Thinking Our Way to Chronic Health.
Love it.
Which is another thing. People only talk about chronic illness.
Yeah.
We that's the way we used to understand aging, and topic that I've done a lot of research on. We used to have the idea, and many still do, that you develop and then you age. Well, why? Why aren't you developing throughout your whole life? So I think that if people take to heart the things that I'm saying, then they can come to expect chronic health. And at the least, people worry about adding more years to their life. I think that more important than that is to add more life to our years. And right now, with the excessive mindlessness, and we're essentially sealed in unlived lives, and it's time to break the seal and to enjoy ourselves.
I was looking at the back of, we read your book, The Power of Mindful Learning, with our Teaching and Learning Center here at Cascadia College. But when I was looking on the back of it, I saw that you had Atul Gawande endorse your book, and he put a very nice thing on there. But what you're saying right now, I hear a lot in his writing. And so I think maybe you've influenced that, or maybe mutually have kind of found your way. But yeah, you're shaking your head no. Anyway, it's just so powerful. One of the takeaways, I have my students in a lifespan psychology class read his book, Being Mortal. And one of the takeaways is just what you've said. More life to your years is a very important.
And yes, but what all of my research shows is that once you're adding more life to your years, you're probably going to be adding more years to your life.
I love it.
So which is a nice bonus.
Yeah. Do you come up against people who would be critical of these claims, these scientific findings?
I tend to stay away from those claims. So
sure. Yeah.
I'm sure that they're out there, but this work has been going on for so long that at this point now, most people are in agreement. When I started this work, the medical model was the most common for the medical world, and then all the people influenced by it. And according to that medical model, the only way you get sick is the introduction of a pathogen. All right. A virus of some sort, that you can't think yourself sick or think yourself well. Then that model changed, and now social factors, psychological factors become more important, but still not as important as this new book claims and provides evidence to say that they are. In fact, virtually everything you experience is a function of your mind. And that what's happened is, because we were trained to be more robotic, more like robots, than is good for us. 1 and 1 is 2. Leaves are green. Well, we all know that in the fall they're not green. And even when they're green, there are, thousands of shades of green, and each of those shades change depending on where the sun is. That we're taught in school very simple answers to questions that lead us to think we know. That's what I meant to tell you before, that the one biggest takeaway from all the work on mindfulness is that what we need is to have a deeper appreciation of uncertainty. We don't know. And when you know you don't know, then you tune in differently from when you think you know. All right. And so by this noticing new things, that shows us we didn't know. All right. But if you step back and say, yeah, I can't know. Now, people are afraid not to know because they think they're supposed to know. So if I'm talking to you and I don't know, but I think I'm supposed to know, and you act like you do know, well, what do? I either pretend that I know, or I genuflect to you, or, whatever. But I'm telling you and anybody else who'll listen that nobody knows. You cannot know, because everything depends on context. Everything is always changing. So the point there, excuse me, is that if you make a personal attribution for not knowing, I don't know, but I should know, then not knowing feels bad. You want the certainty, even if it's illusory. When you make a universal attribution, I don't know, you don't know, nobody knows, then not knowing is actually fun. People are always seeking new experiences, right? They tend to seek the new experience in for them, non-threatening ways. But you can seek this new experience because everything is new for no matter what you're doing, whether it's at work or at play.
So when we hear you talk about mindfulness, there are people like me who are well, and you say I think nobody's mindful, or very few people are mindful. Most of us aren't.
No, most of the time, right?
Yeah. But I would put myself in that category of I've maybe even sacrificed mindfulness for efficiency or some delusion of that.
Oh, but it's not efficient.
I understand. So talk to me about that.
Well, it's interesting. People would say to me, aren't there some times that you should be mindless? That because you'll get things done faster and so on. And my answer is the only time we should be mindless is when we found the very best way of doing something and nothing changes. And clearly those conditions are not going to be met. So then let's say you're in a park and this little kid, a 2-year-old, starts walking into the street. Shouldn't the mother or whoever is there with her pull her out of the street mindlessly because it's quicker? Well, first of all, it's not quicker, number one. Number two, that if you were mindful, the kid wouldn't end up in the street in the first place. And two, or three, whatever number I'm to, that when you're taking the child, grabbing the child to avoid being hit by a car, it would behoove you to have some sense of how the car was moving, by noticing the driver. Because if you're pulling the child to the right, and that's the direction the car is going in, you're not saving the child. So that you want to be there. If you're going to do anything, if you're having a bowl of cereal, you should be there. That, and I believe if you don't think it's worth being there, then it's not worth doing, and you should be doing something else. And so when you do things mindfully, and we have a lot of data on this as well, that not only do you enjoy what you're doing, when we have people doing different tasks, we have others evaluating the task, the product seems to bear the imprint of our mindfulness. So we're alive, the neurons are firing, it's good for our health and well-being. We have data showing that when you're there, people find you more appealing, more charismatic. And we know that, right, Garth? Have you ever thought, oh my God, when you're talking to somebody, and we have expressions like the light's on, but nobody's home. So we know when somebody is there and it's appealing. Okay, so it's good for your health. The neurons are firing. You feel alive. People find you more attractive. It's going to be better for your relationships. It bears its imprint, leaves its imprint on the things that we do. I can see no reason to ever opt to be mindless.
Okay, so when I'm listening to this, I'm thinking, okay, how do I pay more attention to the things I do? And I think in your research, you've given us some hacks. And I would love any hacks that you can give me. I'm just mining you. I'm sitting with Dr. Ellen Langer for an hour, and I better walk away with some new mindful strategies. But I'll tell you what I love about your research. Both the magazine and the orchestra study that you've done.
Yeah.
What you said to those experimental groups was, hold on, let me see if I can get it straight. You've done this a bunch, but now do it in a subtly different way that only you would know. Is that, did I get it right?
Yes, that's right.
All right.
Right.
So
because
can you talk about,
if you're going to make it new, then you're going to be there. That if it's the same old, people know it and you don't enjoy it. The experience is virtually empty. So why do it? So we had orchestras, as you suggested. The Mindless group was told, or the control group was told, play this piece. They're all going to play the same music and play it. Remember a performance you really enjoyed and then replicate that. The mindful group is told, make it new in very subtle ways, as only you would know. Now, what's important here is that they were playing classical music. So that the new ways were indeed subtle. Otherwise, this orchestra would have sounded terrible. And we record it and we play it to people who have no idea about the study. And they overwhelmingly prefer the mindfully played piece. And the musicians prefer playing it that way, almost 2-1. There's no advantage in doing anything mindlessly. One way of understanding mindfulness, if you were, I hate I'm going to say a shooting gallery, but give me some other metaphor. But, you're at a fair and, you have rabbit, duck, and you're supposed to shoot a water gun or whatever as soon as you see the duck. That the more mindful you are, the sooner you're going to see that, right? And so reaction time to change is a very good measure of how mindful one is being, which tells you that if you're in that park and the child starts to walk towards the street, you're going to notice it that much more quickly than if you're mindless. So we actually do things faster when we're mindful.
How is, I know you addressed this in your book, Mindfulness, but how is being mindful different than, or how is it different than meditation? I'm sure they overlap some, but I know you addressed it there.
No, they're very different. In that meditation is a practice in which you engage twice a day for 20 minutes to result in post-meditative mindfulness. So meditation isn't mindful. It's a way to become mindful. And this is just a different way. And important, they're not mutually exclusive. That there are people who think meditation too woo-woo, Californian, we used to say in New York, and so they can't be bothered with it. All of those people should quickly adopt mindfulness as we study it. Then there are some people who are suffering from some very big ailment, where actually we have data with all sorts of chronic illnesses as to how to cure them. Okay. But for them, it's too simple. This thing is so big, you're not going to be able to take care of it so easily. And so for them, meditation would probably be more appealing. The more important thing is that they're not mutually exclusive. We have, that one of the things that people are not aware of is the more mindful you are, the better your relationships will be. And that's a simple thing to explain to people in that, if you don't like me, for example, because you think I'm gullible, and it's sort of hard to be with somebody when you're demeaning them like that, then you recognize that everybody's behavior makes sense from their perspective, or else they wouldn't do it. So if now you're mindful, there are other ways of understanding why the person is doing what they're doing. And now you realize, from my perspective, I'm being trusting. Now, do you want me to be trusting? I mean, you and I are in an intimate relationship. Would you like me to trust you? Of course. So that once we become more mindful, we're less interested in changing the people around us because we understand the advantage to what they're doing. For every negative ascription we have for any behavior, there's an equally strong but oppositely valenced alternative. For every negative, there's a positive. So I can't stand you, Garth. You're so impulsive. That's because you're spontaneous. You find me so inconsistent. That's because I'm flexible, and so on.
You know what I'm
And
hearing?
so,
I'm sorry to jump in on you.
no,
I'm hearing
the only way you're going to get to say anything is if you jump in.
with my counseling psych background, I'm hearing this as kind of the power of reframing, which might be the power of mindfulness.
Okay, so I did lots of the earliest research on cognitive behavior therapy.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, it's not just reframing though, because reframing, so if you go to a therapist and you say to the therapist, this person has done X to you, and then the therapist says, well, why don't you look at it this way? Gives you another frame. There's a tendency to think, well, oh, that's the truth. Rather than that, there are many potential frames that change and that are available to you. All right, so that's part of the difference, but the similarity, because I was involved in that, and now in the mindfulness work, is not surprising. So, but certainly not reframing, unless you want to call it continual reframing, continuous reframing.
Right.
With an understanding that there's no way of knowing at any moment which is, quote, the best frame.
Yeah, and does it matter from a mindfulness perspective? It doesn't matter, does it?
Well, I'm not sure what you're asking me with that. That whether it's the right one or not.
That's right, because it can have the just the act of getting to that more mindful state is going to have the positive impact that we would be looking for.
By knowing that there are alternative ways of understanding things. Yes. The mistake again is when you think, now I've got it right, because then things may change and you're going to be blind to the changes.
Right. Okay. So other than maybe doing things subtly different than for tasks that are maybe even mundane for us, what other things can people engage in?
Yeah. So the most important thing is for people to accept that they don't know, and to recognize that not knowing is a good thing, and to think is kind of stupid.
Mm-hmm.
Pardon my label. But,
no, it's fine.
But that, because schools all teach us, the certainty, and it's an illusion. So I was at a horse event many years ago, and this man asked me if I'd watch his horse because he was going to get his horse a hot dog. And I was an A++ student. So I'm laughing to myself. What, is he kidding? Horses don't eat meat. He came back with the hot dog. The horse ate it. And I love that, realizing that everything I thought I knew could be wrong. So if you mix and match here and start off whatever you're doing with a little humility, a realization that you might not know, that's going to be good for all your interactions with people, because nobody likes anybody who knows all the answers and won't give them an opportunity to participate in the conversation or whatever. And then you realize that every negative ascription you have for somebody is an indication of your own mindlessness. When I was a kid, I remember, I always do everything early. I'm an anti-procrastinator. But this one paper that I wrote for, I think it was in high school. It might have been college. I don't remember. And so I stayed up late and I did this, which was not the way I typically worked. And the next day I read it over and it said, obviously, and I don't remember what followed. I don't remember what the paper was about, but it was obviously, I had no idea what I was talking about. So when you hear yourself say clearly, obviously, how could you, any of these sorts of things, let a bell go off and say, I'm being mindless right now. When you say you can't for anything, you can't know that you can't. So there are expressions like this that hint at our being mindless. But the biggest one is the illusion of certainty. And people conflate mistakenly confidence and certainty. You want to be confident. I'm very confident because I know that I'm not sure of anything. And that's fine. So you can stand tall, but you don't want to think you know. And it also makes you very powerful interpersonally, Garth, because I know you don't know. If you're going to act like you do know, and since I know you don't know, you can just play out in your mind the different ways that scenario could unfold.
All right. So I'm going to ask you no pressure. We can edit this if this doesn't go anywhere. Yeah. But I after this interview today, it's summer now. Classes are over, and I'm going to play golf this afternoon. And I'm not a very good golfer. But I'd like to be a better golfer. How And I don't know if we're going to talk about mindset here or what, but how does somebody take an activity, or maybe it's somebody who's saying, I'm not very good in my relationship, or I don't feel like I have the tools to be successful in business. Yeah.
Let's stick with golf because you brought it up, but we can move to anything after that. That people think that what they want to do is to be expert. And by expert, they mean get it completely right. Well, if you got a hole in one every time you swung that club, there'd be no game.
Right.
So we don't really want that. And if the thing that stands between you and enjoying the game is the self-talk, that I can't do it. What if I can't do it? Will everybody think that I'm, unathletic, and will that affect my attractiveness, and, so on and so forth? If you just stay with the ball and you're noticing things about the ball and you're noticing things about the way the club fits in your hand and you go through the motion, chances are you're going to do well. Now, when you hit the ball, if it doesn't go well, I'm a tennis player rather than golf, and I see people, oh God, why did I, and they go crazy. And, which is not helpful because now they have to get themselves back, and composure in order to play the next shot with golf or whatever.
If you hit a bad tennis shot or a bad golf shot, you'd probably want to say something like, that's interesting. I wonder why that happened.
Yeah. And you can't know. So for me, I guess, and I say, I should have bent my legs. Now, we don't know. I could have bent my legs and still hit a terrible shot. But what happens is now I'm more aware that I should bend my legs in the future. And that for most of us, there are very few of us who are really professional athletes. So what's the difference? It's like cooking. I enjoy cooking and I create things, and sometimes they're awful. So what? But, it's all a function of how we speak to ourselves. So I make this marble cheesecake. It's fabulous. However, it never turns out marble. So I could feel like a failure, but instead what I create is a speckled cheesecake. So it's a failed marble cheesecake. It's a successful speckled cheesecake. The point is for us to say to ourselves, whatever is bothering us, is it a tragedy or an inconvenience? And almost never is it a tragedy. You hit a bad shot. All right, so I hit a bad shot. That means I can play this game for a long time because there's opportunity for me to improve. And people need to understand this, that if you always wanted to win, then play whatever game you're playing against a 6-year-old. That most of us enjoyed tic-tac-toe until we learned the rule to the game. And now it's no longer fun. So by fully appreciating that it's the not knowing that actually makes it fun.
Well, that's great. What I learned today is to play more young children at games. So the chambermaid study, let's just jump back to that because I think it has something to do with this. So you, as a scientist, you learn all these things about the impact of mindfulness in this situation. Just like we were talking, even about golf or tennis or business or whatever, you have. But the question is why? Have you gotten to? Is it that there are now? I mean, you've shown that there are physical benefits to mindfulness. There are probably emotional benefits to mindfulness as well. But
sure,
why is it? And what do you propose? Why does mindfulness make us live longer? Why does mindfulness lower blood pressure?
It's an interesting question. What's the meaning of life? Essentially,
I know it's beyond
on
kind
par
of
with that. That for me, all I can say with a modicum of confidence is that when we are doing this active noticing, we're in the present. When we're in the present, we can take advantage of opportunities to which we'd otherwise be blind, that our minds and bodies are one unit, so that as we're doing this noticing, the neurons are firing and doing the, feeding the body in a way that keeps us alive.
Yeah. Well, I just know, and even just experientially, the people in my life who are the most mindful people, they seem to be the people that I would like to hang out with the most.
Sure.
They're just, and I think you mentioned it, or different, like that they're more interesting, but there's a relational connection that can happen more easily.
Without question, that if somebody is more mindful, they're going to be less judgmental, right? And so then we're going to feel more nurtured. But we have some new data that's in the Mindful Body book that's wild. It's about mindful contagion. And I'm not going to go through it next. I don't want to give away the whole book, but essentially that if you and I are together and I am mindful, you're more likely to become mindful. And which is very nice, because in a company, you don't have to have everybody participating in this, this new program to make everybody more mindful, a certain percentage, and then it will just move throughout the company. Because when you're mindful, you're feeling alive. So it's something that's going to be self-sustaining.
I know this feeling of sitting with people who are mindful. And as a person who is going a lot, that's what I do. I go, not super mindful. And then when I sit down with somebody who's mindful, it's like I can take a breath and just be present. It's like it's an invitation from them to kind of join into this. And I love that. I love that.
I mean, I think that the major cause of illness and unhappiness interpersonally in the sorts of settings you're talking about is stress, and comes from our worrying about being evaluated and negatively evaluated. And if we paid more attention, or some attention, to why we're doing what we're doing, then we wouldn't feel as vulnerable to other people looking at us askance.
Yeah.
But if you're doing it mindlessly and you don't know why you're doing it, and somebody else comes along and says, Garth, what do why would you do that? And then you feel small. Whereas if you knew why you're doing it, you say, oh, no, I was doing it not because, why was I with Ellen? Not because, like you see her as gullible, but because I realize that she's trusting. And that's something that makes me feel comfortable. We don't have to apologize for ourselves, because everything we do makes some sense, or else we wouldn't do it.
As we kind of move into the back half of this interview, I just want to ask you some questions about the book, and then I'd like to ask you some questions about you. And so, first of all, the book. How long have you been working on this book for, and how did it come to be?
It's interesting. Everybody. A lot of people ask me questions with any book I write. How long did it take to write it? And I don't really know how to answer that, because to sit down with a paper and pencil, or to gather the data, or to have the ideas in the first place.
Yeah.
And for me, I'm not writing it under any pressure. I'm writing it because I enjoy writing it, and so I'm less aware of how many hours I'm spending doing it. I had lots of new research, and so it was natural then for me to write another book. Each of these books reviews some of the research from the past, and then a whole bunch of new studies to make new points. In this book, we've spent some time now, Garth, talking about health, but a lot of the book is about things like our illusion of predictability, decision-making, risk-taking, stress. And these are ideas that when we're more mindful, we don't have an illusion of decision-making. We don't worry about being able to predict. We don't have any stress. And you can see how that, of course, is going to be good for our bodies.
Wow. I think I need to just think about that. That's just a really powerful statement for people who are feeling stressed out, who are running a million. I was talking to a friend yesterday. We were fishing yesterday, and it felt so good. And then as soon as we were driving away, it's like all those worries come back, all the things that you need to do come back, and just what an important.
Well, that's why I say the one-liner that I have a book called The Art of Noticing, which has one-liners that I culled from my research, along with some paintings of mine. And the one that people seem to resonate most to is to ask yourself, is it a tragedy or an inconvenience?
Yeah.
To get back to yourself, say, all right, so if I don't make it home in time for dinner, it's not going to matter that much. If I miss the deadline, so on and so forth. But people need to, and I think many people do realize this, but they forget it too often as well, that events don't cause stress. What causes stress are our views of events. So if you open up the view, you're going to immediately be less stressed. So if you and I don't know why I always use this example, but let me continue with it. You and I go out to dinner and the dinner is awful. The dinner is great. Okay, that's wonderful. If we go out to dinner and the dinner is awful, for me, that's also great because I'll eat less. Okay, so we act as if there are events that are good, there are events that are bad. You have to do what you can to get the good ones, step on people and whatever, and run away from it. But these are, they don't have any meaning until we impose the meaning on it. So a little takeaway for people about stress. Since stress relies on the illusion of prediction, you're saying to yourself, something is going to happen. And when it happens, it's going to be awful. So you can take those, deal with both of those. The first, something is going to happen. Simply say to yourself, what are 3 reasons that it might not happen? 5 reasons, even 1 reason. So you went from, it's definitely going to happen implicitly, to maybe it'll happen, maybe it won't. So it's a little less stressful right at the start. Now let's assume it does happen. How is that a good thing? As the dinner I just said, that I won't gain weight and, I'll be able to eat that ice cream when I get home. So yeah, people are told so many things that I find offensive. They're told you have to be stressed. Stress is just part of life. Well, no, I don't think it's just part of life. And certainly it doesn't have to be as big a part of life as many of us make it.
Would you say, I just have this question about you because I don't know you very well, but would you say that coming into this research 45 years ago, would you say that you were a person who was more prone towards stress, or were you kind of more naturally?
On the contrary.
Okay.
No, on the contrary. Okay. There's so much negativity around that even as a little kid, I would always give the other side. You'd say, oh, terrible X. I'd say, well, why not look at it as Y, and so on. So I had, before I got to graduate school, I was already well into looking for alternative explanations.
What, this is, off, well, it's not off topic, but it might come out of left field. But right now we see politics are so they're everything that you're not talking about. It's everybody is so certain about everything, and it's a lot of in groups and out groups. What institutions or organizations or what mindful things are going on in our country right now that are good places for people to be? What philosophies, what teachings, where is this good stuff?
The good stuff is anything that you read or talk to people about, or that shows you a different way. We have a mistake, and I think that we're all in our camps. And when you're listening to somebody from the other camp, you don't listen to them. You just assume they're wrong. And but if you took whatever was said and make believe it was somebody in your camp who said it, and then you say, oh, that makes some sense as a way of sort of bringing us back together. I'm not sure that these camps are going to be self-sustaining. I think that perhaps at some point, the divisions, you have right and left, let's say, and so there'll be other categories up and down, and so half of the right will be in the up and half of the right will be in the down, and so on, mixing and matching. And the more of these superordinate categories that occur, the more we break away from what's happening right now. But and AI, I don't want to get too deeply into this, but may help in that way, because the one thing that people are so afraid of with AI, well, we know they're afraid they're going to lose their jobs, but putting all that aside, is that there's so much misinformation. And, I made a prediction years ago that turned out to be wrong, that now could possibly become true. And I thought, well, with the internet, there was so much medical misinformation, that I thought people would learn not to accept information on the face of it without thinking when maybe it's true, when it might be false, for whom, and so on. It didn't work that way. But the main thing about lots of this AI is you just don't know if it's true. Well, we just don't know if anything is true. It's never true independent of context. Horses sometimes eat meat. 1 and 1 is sometimes not 2, and so on. So there's a way all of this may end up making us a more mindful world. We'll see.
Well, thanks for allowing me to ask a question that is kind of a little peripheral, but here I just want to talk about you a little bit before we wrap up today, because I find your story really interesting. And by the way, for folks who have never heard Ellen give a talk before, if you search up some of her talks on YouTube, or you get a chance to see her sometime, Ellen, I just really appreciate your storytelling, especially as a researcher. I think that is just this particular gift and skill to be able to share your research, and you do it through your writing too. But I love your stage presence, by the way, in your talks.
Thank you.
Yeah,
that's very nice, Garth. Let me tell you that for this new book, The Mindful Body, it started out as a memoir. And then my agent said to me, Ellen, it's very hard to write a memoir. I said, David, so I'll learn. And then I got a call from somebody to see if I had photos that this person was going to use in his memoir. I called David. I said, so-and-so's writing. And he said, he looked it up. He said, he's writing, what was it called? It wasn't a memoir. It was about a work memoir, basically a research memoir. And I said, so that's what I'll do. Anyway, so then it evolved into the book that it is. The reason I'm telling you that is that there are lots and lots of stories that I probably otherwise wouldn't admit to, because it started as a memoir. So if you like stories, you'll be surprised at some of these.
I can't wait to get my hands on it and read it. That's for sure. Now, Ellen, is it true that you were the first woman tenured faculty member at Harvard University in 1981?
No, in the psychology department.
In the
university itself, there might have been 2 or 3 others. It's a large university.
All right,
school and so on.
I want to know what that meant to you at the time. How competitive was that for you to make your way there?
I guess as the mother of mindfulness, it's strange for me to say I was sort of oblivious to the sort of thing you're suggesting. It was scary because at that time, Harvard didn't have the system it has now, which is if you're hired as a junior professor and you continue to do the good things you've been doing to be hired, chances are you're going to get tenure. At the time I got tenure, it was a very different system. And so it was a little scary. But so what is the question? You want to know how scary it was?
Well, yeah, I think it's an important piece of history for Harvard and for, women in psychology. And
Yeah, well, at that time, I was, in my own mind, the hottest thing out there. And so it felt that if I didn't get tenure, that wouldn't be fair. And, somebody asked me if I would sue. Shortly after, somebody in the sociology department did end up suing Harvard. while I am confident and seem forceful in some ways, I'm a wuss. I mean, there was no way that I would sue Harvard. Yeah, it was long and drawn out. And then what happened is there were many stages to this, not too many to go through, but and none of them are pro forma. I mean, each one can be a rejection. And so the last piece went to the president, and that was on Friday, and which meant I had to go through the weekend without knowing. And so that, because that was the last thing that happened, that was, has remained the most salient. And then it was a big celebration, in fact, it was so exciting that people would ask me about the counterclockwise study. Did I follow up with people? And and I had to admit, no, I had just gotten tenure. I was so excited about having gotten tenure. I didn't do some of the things I might have otherwise done. But
now, and now you've been at Harvard. What is your role?
Forever.
For forever. Yeah. So how has your role changed there over time?
I don't know that people are so aware of their own changes. That you don't know if you're changing because the university has changed, because you've gotten older, because there are a different set of colleagues, so many things, different students. But I think that my level of involvement, probably as an older person, has changed some. I remember when I was very young and there were all of these rules, and then a few years later the rules changed, and then a few years after that the rules changed, and then after that I stopped paying attention to them. So my students would say to me, what do I have to do to before I do X, Y, or Z? And I'd say, I don't know. You should go find out. It's interesting because having been there for so long, I almost don't know of any other life.
Yeah.
I've been there since I was 30 years old, 29 years old. And I remember being fond of saying that I was the most senior person in the department, but not the oldest. And that's starting to change. I'm not the oldest. I'm one of the oldest.
Were your folks college educated?
No, my father was. He was a pharmacist. My mother wasn't. And I remember that my mother had said to me many, many years ago that I should take up typing so I have, an alternative for life.
If it doesn't work out?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I wish she had been alive to see me get tenure. My parents are fabulously supportive, which probably is why I'm so positive. And she would have had me laminated if she could have. So it would have been nice if she could have seen the end result of all of this.
Oh, that's lovely. That's so great. Who was in your department? Like, where was your professional community? So you've been, and I'll just, like, for me, APA Division 2 is teaching psychology. It's become my professional community. It's a national kind of community, as much as my departmental colleagues have been kind of that support to me over time. So over your career, where have you found support and community?
That's an interesting question. Put differently, some dean that I was having lunch with 40 years ago or whatever had said there are people who, we'll say play to, but I don't mean that in a pejorative sense, play to the department, others to the university, others to the field, and some to the world. Mm-hmm. And I think, and that sounds, grand, ever grander, but I don't mean it that way. No. But I think that I've oriented myself to the larger community. So I have friends who I have exciting discussions with and arguments with about some of this stuff, who are physicists, who have nothing, not training in psychology. And then I spend most of my time, my intellectual community, by and large, are my students, my present students and students from the past that I stay in touch with.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Well, Dr. Langer, thank you so much for your time today. I am grateful for all the research that you have done over these years. I'm grateful that you have put it out to the public so that many people's lives can be improved. And actually, you entertain us as well in your writing. So good luck with the new book. And I want to just thank you sincerely for the time you took today to sit down.
Thank you, Garth. This was fun.
If you are enjoying the Psych Sessions podcast, we want to invite you to support us. You can do this in a couple of ways. You can do it by going to wherever you listen to Psych Sessions, whether that is on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, and leave a review there. You could also make a donation to Psych Sessions. Psych Sessions is a 501c3 nonprofit charitable organization, and we can issue tax receipts if you want to give. Just go to psychsessions.org and click on the donate button. Thanks for your support and for making Psych Sessions free professional development for teachers of psychology.